I think we're recording.
Awesome. So thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today.
No
Could you
worries.
tell me a bit about how role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons foster friendship and community?
Um, there are a number of ways. I think. So I'm just thinking about my last night. I played last night, and the community that comes along from everyone chatting before the game actually starts, and that develops over time. The friendships that are fostered in there, and the support that you can get. It's a little different right now under COVID because of we're playing online. On the other hand, because people are living in different spots, we've been able to maintain friendships that we might not have maintained before. So my DM is in the Navy, and he had to move for that reason, but we're still able to game together, so that's an excellent thing. But even before that, it's a great way to, I think, get to know each other, because in my opinion, good role playing requires some acting, and that means letting guards down at certain points if you really want to get into the character, and that means trusting each other.
And are there unique aspects of, I suppose, the game mechanics of tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons that make them particularly good at fostering this type of community, as opposed to, say, like Monopoly or other types of games?
Well, I don't know that I've ever made friends playing Monopoly. I certainly have made my wife angry at me at times playing Monopoly. Yeah, I think the unique mechanics of role-playing games, at least in so far as I've experienced them, is that you're building a story together. You're not against each other. You're not competing with each other. And you're not even competing with the dungeon master if you have a good dungeon master, right? The dungeon master is someone who helps construct a story, maybe sets the outlines, but of what's possible. So there's more of a collaboration, right? And so I think the heart of role-playing games is to collaborate in telling a story through acting out different kinds of characters in specific scenarios.
And do you have, could you tell me a bit about like an instance from a game that you've played that's like an example of this, if you have one?
Of creating a story together?
Yeah.
Yeah, so a long time ago, I sound old. There was a game I was in, and the DM was interested in how we perceived a particular kind of world, and how we wanted to act in that world. And so there was moments there where we could help create the world, I guess is what I'm trying to say. I guess if you want more concrete examples, I have to be like get kind of specific that we might lose. But anyway, so the story that I'm telling right now is I'm a DM for one game, and I've set out some general ideas for it. But I'm letting the characters kind of create it as we go along in various ways. So if they come upon something and they ask a particular kind of question, that might determine something about the world, right? So one of the examples from the game last night was someone asked a question about, where was this person? And I had to think, well, that person didn't really exist for me. So now there's this person in the world, and the world changes because of that. As a player, I can think of times like that where I've worked with a DM. I wanted to have a particular kind of character with a particular kind of mission, and we collaborated on what the skills of the character were, right? So this character became a demon hunter, where there wasn't really a specific way for that to happen within the game mechanics, that we created the mechanics together. And so, in those sorts of collaborations, there's obviously trust, because you're changing the game in some ways, and there's trust in terms of developing the story, and there's a certain kind of friendship that goes along with that. And I think the I don't want to, yeah, the deeper the friendship, the more you can do with the story. So if you think about Aristotle's 3 levels of friendship, utility, pleasure, and true friendship, if you're just doing it for utility, there's less trust there. But pleasure, there's a certain trust that comes together, that we're going to trust each other in order to have the kind of fun that we're looking at. And then true friendship obviously requires even more trust, but also certain kinds of virtues itself. And so that allows even more collaboration, I would say. I feel very philosophical in talking about something that, we just do for fun.
Yeah. In your article, Others Play at Dice, you mentioned players, as their characters are forming relationships, they're simultaneously forming relationships player to player. Could you expand a bit on that for me?
Yeah. I'm trying to think of particular examples to kind of help out here, but I've seen this in other games. The previous game that we just ended, it lasted for 2.5 years, and there were this was a game where we came together from an ad on a meetup place, and then we came together and we started playing in this church, which was odd in itself, right? That a church would let us use their space to play this game that so many find to be objectionable. And as the characters developed, there were 2 characters who, part of their plot line was that they were going to have a relationship, right? And so that changed how they acted in the game, but it also sort of changed how they developed as friends outside of the game, so that they could trust each other enough, and one needed a place to live, and so was able to move in with the other one without there being any kind of romantic or sexual relationship. It was just a friendship that happened. So that's just kind of one concrete example. Talking about different kinds of struggles and sorts of things. I mean, there's disagreements politically between myself and my friend who's in the Navy, but we're able to talk about these things in a way that we might struggle over if we didn't have this thing in common, and that was developed through the mechanics of the game that allowed us to kind of explore different ideas. Am I being specific enough? I feel like.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
What has been something that has, I guess, surprised you in your experience, either writing academically about role-playing games, or just through your own experience with playing Dungeons and Dragons? Something that just surprised you about the game?
Something that surprised me about the game itself. I was worried about writing about the game because I had taught a course on Tolkien's Lord of the Rings, and teaching the course made me less interested for a while in the game, in the Lord of the Rings books. But writing on Dungeons and Dragons has not made me less interested, and I think that has to do with the friendships that are there. So that was a little bit surprising. I think the way that I talk about how the game mechanics work in that article and in a previous article on ideology was kind of surprising. I sort of picked it up as like, I'm looking for some example. Is this going to work? And I didn't actually think it was going to work. and the fact that I was able to make the kinds of points that I wanted to make. In the article you mentioned about friendship, but in the previous article about ideology critique was kind of surprising. So there were some surprising things about that. And then as a player and a DM, I would say that the ability of the game genre to explore different ideas about the world itself in a fun way with others, without even thinking about what's going on in the world, but we're still exploring these same kinds of ideas, is often surprising.
So you mentioned sort of being able to have these relationships over longer distances, and during the pandemic, the D&D community on TikTok really took off, and this has been primarily these people forming a close-knit community over the internet. Could the community building aspects of role-playing games have potentially given players like an advantage in forming a community when everybody was suddenly isolated, socially isolated?
Theoretically, it's possible. I'd like to see studies to kind of back that up empirically. What kind of ways did this happen? And I have to say, I'm curious in comparison to non-tabletop games. How did video games help build a community? I mean, I read articles about how there are communities in video games, and I over the summer, actually through the pandemic, I tried to play Rise of Kingdoms, and there was lots of discussion in the chats and stuff in Rise of Kingdom about how there's a community here, and I never really got that. I never became part of that, and I don't know if that's just because I don't like playing video games and I really like playing tabletop games, and so for me, turning to the internet for a supplement for the tabletop game was useful, whereas turning to the video game as a supplement for just a community was not as useful, because I just don't play those kinds of games. So theoretically, yes, that is certainly possible, and I would love to say yes, absolutely. But I wouldn't want to stake a claim without seeing some empirical studies. Have you looked into that at all?
I've been looking into it. It doesn't seem like anyone has done empirical studies on this particular topic yet. But yeah, I guess I'm just exploring the possibility of it.
Okay. Yeah.
Are there things that like the broader world who maybe don't know much about Dungeons and Dragons can learn from the friendship and community building aspects of it?
I would hope so. I love Dungeons and Dragons. I've played it for a long time. I mean, there were periods in my life when I couldn't play it. So I think there's something valuable to it. And I think, it would be nice if I could get some of my other friends to play a game. I've never been able to convince my wife to play, for instance. Could she learn something about friendship? I don't want to go publicly and say yes on that question. In general, could people learn about friendship and community? I would say yes, because what players are doing in the game is A, problem solving, and B, choosing what kinds of things to pursue within the game, right? And so just like in life, there are various kinds of goods that we can go after. In the game, there are various kinds of goods that we can go after. And I know there's a lot of people who say, oh, it's about, getting the money and the magic items and that sort of stuff. And that's true to a certain extent, but that's sort of like the side thing, right? We don't go in and say, give us all your money. We go in and we're trying to solve a situation. So I think there's something to learn there. I hope there's something to learn that everyone could, benefit from. And I have played with the idea of using the game in a class on ethics and community. And I haven't been able to figure out how I would structure it so that I could run, 5 games at a time, or one large game with 25 people. So yeah, that's where I would go with that question.
Could you tell me a bit more on using it as part of a class on ethics and community? I if unless if there's more to tell, I guess.
Well, so I developed a class on ethics and community, and it's the idea about building community. And I work in the philosophy of Alastair MacIntyre and Aristotle more broadly. So I see community as radically democratic, and centered on pursuing goods together, pursuing some things in common. That doesn't mean we agree upon everything. It doesn't mean that we have to agree upon everything. It means that we choose to work together and live together in such a way that we're after some of the same sorts of things, right? And I'm not here talking about money or fame or that sort of stuff. I'm talking about a certain kind of way of life. How do we want to live this life? So the way that I thought about using it in the class is as a counter to asking those questions in just a generic kind of way, where students are thinking about, I've got to do this to pass this course, and what I'm really interested in is the A, and get them away from thinking about that and enjoying the game and what kind of things could happen within a game that would help them see the possibilities for building a community outside of the game, right? So the one issue there that I would have to face is the mechanics. What kind of mechanics do we use? I wouldn't want everyone to try to learn, 5th edition or Pathfinder 2E or something, because that takes away from what we're actually doing in terms of building the game. So that was one of the issues that I faced with that. But I do think there's some potential there to get students to think about what they might have in common and how they might think practically about pursuing goods that they choose together.
Awesome. Those are all the questions that I have for now. Is there anything else that you would like to say about this topic?
There's a guy on YouTube, I listen to his videos, Treant Monk, who ends his videos by saying D&D is for everyone, and I'd like everyone to kind of believe that and kind of practice that. He makes such wonderful videos about optimizing your character, but he's really about playing the game and having fun with the game, and I think that's kind of nice. And to see, like, he's built this kind of community on YouTube, which is kind of interesting, and to think about what community is there. So I think that's what I would want to end with saying myself, is that if we can build community, if we could make D&D for everyone, that would be awesome.
Great. Well, thank you so much for speaking with me today.
Sure. Could you just say a little bit about your topic itself, and if anybody watches this video on YouTube, they might want to be interested and look forward to what you're publishing?
Yeah, so I'm working on a feature article, and it's going to be covering the community building aspects of D&D, sort of centered on the D&D community that developed on TikTok, but also covering the unique aspects of TTRPGs and how those can be applied to the broader world and potentially be used to solve more complex problems.
Okay, excellent. Sounds cool. Thanks, Grace, for asking to talk to me.
Yeah, absolutely. I hope you have a great day.
You too.